Good evening, my friends on the western side of the world, and good morning, good night for those of you who are hopefully not listening live in Europe or in Asia, but I know we have listeners all across the world. Thank you so much for tuning in live or watching this back. It's great to have you. As always, I am Chris Sherrick, the host of the Warm Blooded Founders Show. I'm excited to be here tonight. Our guest rocks. For those of you who have not seen the show before, I'll give you a quick intro as to what we do here and why we're here. So, what you're listening to, if you are listening to this back, this is a live recording. We are doing this live, no edits, no cuts, raw, authentic human conversation. And that is the goal of this show. The concept of the Warm Blooded Founders came from this personal exploration I had transitioning from W-2 salaried work into my own entrepreneurship journey and having a archetype put out in front of me for what a successful CEO looks like. And that archetype is typically talked about in a Fortune 20, very corporate, cold blooded CEO fashion. Someone who is very transactional, drives the stock price up, prioritizes profits over people, all these different things that I personally, in my time, both in startups and in those Fortune 20 environments, never respected people or leaders who used to treat me as a cog in the wheel as opposed to a person with a life with my own ambitions and purpose within that company, but also um, wanting to be more than that. Never respected it. It never resonated well with me. Never got the best work out of me. And over the last year, we've been on a discovery talking to incredible founders and guests like we have tonight, asking them, what does a warm-blooded founder mean? And for me, being able to go deeper on their journeys and for them to be able to share their stories for where they're at, how they've gotten there, and to go deeper on that concept of is it possible to be a successful leader, a successful entrepreneur, without being such a numbers-driven robot, if you will. And I mean, for those of you who work in these types of environments, you've seen these types of people. And look, there's a place for them. It's just that place is not for me, and it's typically not the place for a number of you who are listening, or for those who are coming on the show. So I am so happy to have you here. This is the third or second episode, last episode until we hit the end of the year. Thank you for joining us. And for those of you who celebrate the holidays at the end of the year, I wish you all happy holidays. If I forget to say that at the end of the podcast, and for everyone, I wish you a happy and safe transition into the new year, which is going to be an exciting year. And I will say one more thing before I bring our guest on, is I may be taking a personal self-reflection break in the new year, in the first couple months. I don't know if the show will be on as frequent as it has been, or if at all, for a few weeks. So if you love the show, let me know and tell me to come back and to keep doing it. For me, this time is not it's not the end of the show. It's not intended to be. It's meant to be a period of reflection. When we invest time, energy, money into something, it's good to take a step back and a moment to breathe and to look at the results and whether or not it's heading in the direction that you wanted to. And if not, do you need to pivot? As opposed to just keep continuing to do it because that's what's on your calendar this week. And I'm doing that personal exercise for myself in a number of different areas, this show included. But again, if you do love the show and you do end up missing me and it and our awesome guests, then let us know, whether in the comments on these videos or directly to us at LinkedIn or by going to our website. So with all of that said, I'm going to bring our wonderful guest on tonight. Noelle London is joining us. Noelle, it's great to have you. Noelle is a founder and entrepreneur coming from a background in tech innovation and social impact. But as she will share with you tonight, she is much more defined by her experience within entrepreneurship, hard-earned experience with Illuminous. So, Noelle, for those who don't know you, can you give them just a bit more background on who you are and why you're here?
Yeah. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Noelle London. I'm the founder and CEO of Illuminous. At Illuminous, what we do is we're an AI-powered employee data platform that essentially brings data together from systems that isn't talking to each other. And what we help organizations do is just to navigate massive change within the workforce. So, are you acquiring a new company and need visibility there? Do you want to better understand how employees are working through their journeys with the organization? Are you thinking about, what your workforce of the future looks like, and you need the data that helps you to make those important decisions? And so that's a little bit about what we do in terms of why I'm here. I mean, Christopher, I know you were just talking a little bit about, your why and why you do these kinds of podcasts. I think this is so important. And having these kinds of platforms is so important to actually be real when you're building something. I'm sure everybody that's listening that's building something, it's uncomfortable to sit at the holidays and try to explain to your family what you're doing and how things are really going. You customers all the time, you're growing, you're telling your investors that everything's great, you're telling your team that everything is like, this is the breakout year. And it's really tough what's going on behind the scenes as an individual and as a human that's making this business happen. And so
Yes.
there's not enough of this. There's not enough of the real life stories where it's not like, hey, I put out my round and it was filled in 36
Right.
hours. It's
Right.
all bullshit.
Yeah, it's
And so
bullshit.
really like what's happening behind the scenes. That's why I'm here. That's why this is exciting to me. And I'll be vulnerable. I'll share some things, hoping that you all feel comfortable doing the same thing in your journeys, because we need more of these kinds of conversations.
First of all, Noel, you are awesome. What an epic way to come onto the show. You are absolutely right. It's a big reason why I started doing this and why I've cared to continue doing this is people like you providing that platform for those stories to exist. Selfishly, I get to learn from people who are farther along in their entrepreneurial journey than I am. But that learning process, why not make it something that other people can benefit from? And typically, when you're doing any sort of curiosity research, you don't learn by talking the whole time, you learn by listening. So in many ways, this is my attempt at being able to do that. I am really excited to get into your founding origin and how you landed where you're at. One of the warm-blooded concepts for me as well is post-COVID, I feel like we've been almost all virtual, right? At least us entrepreneurs, especially those who are a bit earlier and maybe keep things a bit lean. Maybe you'll make some investment to go meet in person, once or twice a year for culture purposes, for strategic alignment. But it's not as typical now where we're in the office. So there is a level of trust building that needs to happen virtually. And I've found that when people see you as human, even sometimes when you make those emotional mistakes and those emotions come out, that it doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing. Sometimes people need to know how to work with you, and you're not getting those in between moments like you typically would in an office space that we did before. So those relationships and that type of connection and even boundaries and policies for how communication happens and how to interact with each other are being formed amorphously over virtual communication. And for younger companies, sometimes those policies aren't set or aren't clear, and they run into a number of these issues that I'm sure you work on or deal with Illuminous. So I'm excited to get into that. But before we do, I have one curveball question for you, which is I talked a little bit about what it means to be a warm-blooded founder for me. And I'd love to hear, you already started to allude to it, but I'd love to hear just in your own words, what does that concept mean to you? What does it mean to be a warm-blooded founder?
Yeah, I think what it means to be a warm-blooded founder is to have the courage to be unique.
Hmm.
I think it means having a perspective, and being able to chart your own path. You're here because you see something that should exist in the world and you see a solution. It's not been done before. Maybe people are attempting to do it, but it hasn't been done in the same way that you're doing it. And so
Hmm.
to me, that's what it means is, not following the playbooks,
Yeah.
not following the set blueprint of this is what you do at XYZ. It's trusting your gut and trusting your own
Hmm.
unique perspective to build the company that you believe should exist and that you are courageously building. Um, that means, I think you get a lot of advice And a lot of
Yes.
well-intended advice as you're starting a company about, you hire someone from industry. That's not a good decision. Hey, that's my personal experience. You may have a very different one. But those typical things of like, this is what you do, why,
Sure.
that's not taking into account your unique talents and your unique skill sets, and I think that sometimes that can put people on almost this, like, treadmill of how they're building a company, and it doesn't feel like you ever actually perform because you're not pulling in your unique skill set, background, experience, perspective on why you are uniquely building this thing, and you're gonna build it in a way that's not necessarily VC pattern matching. You're
Sure.
building it because you're bringing something new to the table and you're taking those market signals, bringing your skill sets, bringing the right people to the table, to build something that's unique. So, warm-blooded
Yeah.
founder means having a heartbeat, having a perspective, being
Yeah.
unique,
I
knowing
love
when to
that.
not take advice.
I absolutely love that, and it takes some time to build that courage to trust your gut and to learn when to take advice, when not to take it. I'm certainly in that. Well, I mean, that might be a growing period forever, right? Ideally, because you are constantly changing the challenges you are taking on, and therefore the advice you might get or the decisions you might need to make might change. But that courage you talked about, it's really interesting because that courage to be unique and to go chart your own path, as you said it exists at the earliest stages, which is where we're going to start today's show. And I've also found that it exists in those down moments that you talked about, right? You have to have the courage to keep going. You have to make active decisions constantly. I have days where I wake up and I have to remind myself why the hell I'm doing all this because I just don't want to get out of bed, right?
Yeah.
And people don't really talk about that, but yeah, I'm excited to get into that.
Mhm.
Let's start with the point where you had the courage to be unique and to start to chart your own path. So, first topic tonight, we're going to be talking about your founding origin and stepping into full commitment. Your background is unique. It's like everyone's. You end up everyone has a different path to starting to become an entrepreneur. There might be the VC playbook path of who they would like to see be the founders of a company. It's typically people who have already exited a company, which is impossible for people doing it for the first time,
Yeah,
right?
and people that
But
don't look like me.
yeah, right, exactly. So, what was your moment that either this the starting moment for all this or the moment when you decided to shift out of that old playbook and into your new playbook where you decided it's time for me to go all in?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I think there's kind of like two parts of that. Of there's the founding story and the origin story, and then I think that there's like the constant evolution of myself as I've been building this company. And those are two very different things. As in, I think what you start to do is never what you actually do. And it's like the courage to be able to continue holding on and following the thread that leads you into this growth personally, but it also leads you into the growth of your business because you listen long enough that you actually know what you need to be building. And so for me, everybody has a unique story. Mine was definitely a long time coming to build this company, as in, I was very fortunate to my first job out of college. I was a Peace Corps volunteer down in Nicaragua. And I signed up and said, I'll go anywhere in the world for 27 months. I'll do anything that you tell me to do. And I got a letter like 8 days from today, many moons ago, in the mail that said, you're going to be teaching entrepreneurship in Nicaragua. And the first thing I said after reading it, I like looked confused and was like, what is entrepreneurship? I have no idea. And so I went down to Nicaragua, worked for 2.5 years, fell in love with entrepreneurship. And for me, what I like, my cousin had sent me binders of, here's my entrepreneurship class from when I was in college. Didn't even read any of that. But I got to Nicaragua and was like, oh, like for me, what this means is it means that you're a creative problem solver. And that makes a whole lot of sense to me because I come from like being an economics major, and being creative and artistic and like coming from both sides of my family, like that makes a ton of sense. And
Mm.
so I fell in love with entrepreneurship as a way that you can create and build and solution and problem solve and learn a whole bunch of different things at once and like kind of ebb and flow and be curious. I knew that I wanted to be a founder. I was fortunate that I knew that very early on. And I was like, oh, like I had a jewelry business when I was in high school, and I didn't even know that that's what that word meant. Um, and so for me, I think I knew I wanted to build something. I found building, creating just like the most beautiful thing that you can do in many ways. And so what I did is I worked for a decade in and around startups, wearing every single hat along the way. So like I was a researcher at a university on technology transfer. I started an incubator to help other startups grow. I did corporate innovation programs. I did a little bit of investing. I wore like, you hear about this thing, the startup ecosystem. I kind of did all the things around the
Yeah.
circle.
Hmm.
And my goal with that was I am going to build something one day. I want to learn how you build great companies, and I want to help a
Hmm.
lot of people along the way, because there's also something really cool about this entrepreneurial community where it's like, I help you, you help me. Like that's the
Yeah.
only way we're going to get
Sure.
through this is like sometimes things are good for me, sometimes things are good for you. We're going to help each other through it. And I think that that's
Yeah.
also something that's really unique, especially when we think about just like our society. I think that there's
Yeah.
something really beautiful and special about that.
Totally.
And so I had done a lot in economics. I'd done a lot in workforce development. Economic development was something that was always in financial empowerment. All of those kind of
Hmm.
concepts were really interesting to me. It's what I'd studied in school. I came back from Peace Corps. I went to grad school. I don't really know exactly what I was doing. Like I was sitting in policy in the business school. They both told me I didn't belong there. So I like built my own fellowship. No one was really talking about this intersection of like, how can you solve big societal problems and also make a business that makes money off
Mm.
of it? And to me, that always seemed so simplistic and thinking of like not being able to bring those concepts together. And so, yeah, I had worked a lot with startups along the way and knew at some point it'd be my turn. I most recently was over at one of the largest management consulting firms leading their HR technology partnerships. So
Hmm.
essentially, I was like pulled in there to build their ventures team. I'd done a lot of corporate innovation work actually as a contractor with them from like a couple of steps and chapters before that.
Yeah.
Stay in touch with people always. That's important.
Yes.
You
Yep.
never know where it's going to turn out
So
and turn
true.
up. And so I got pulled in to like build this program for them. We were going to be investing in tech startups, putting our services around them, taking them into our Fortune 2000 clients as like really unique offerings. I ended
Yeah.
up owning HR technology, made sense because I was coming from like workforce development, economic development background, fell in
Hmm.
love with it. While I was at that management consulting company, truthfully, like as much as and you said something earlier about being like impact investing heavy. I think I've like shied away from the impact side simply because I think that there's a connotation around it. Has that
Mm.
always been my end? There's this like soft connotation around that, right?
Sure.
That I've
Yeah.
always been like,
You don't want to be put in a box.
no, I don't. And not to be taken, I'm already not taken seriously. Let's be honest. Like, as a female founder, I don't want to be considered a social impact entrepreneur.
Sure.
But do I think that's where like huge societal issues can be solved through business? Abso-freaking-lutely. And
Mm.
so I started getting into, I go to a big management consulting firm. I'm like, honestly, like that soda company is not what makes me tick. Like
Mm.
that's fine, but it's not what makes me tick. Like something that is going to drive a massive impact is what makes
Yeah.
me tick. And as I started working, I was there during 2020. I was there when like, everything's blowing up. It's like
Sure.
DEI, COVID, work from home,
Yeah.
everything's going on.
Yeah.
And what I start watching is like mapping out just this like massive change that's happening in the workforce where it's like, okay,
Yes.
I started mapping it out like on a slide and being like, this is what 2020 looked like. And this is like all the ups and downs. 2021, all the ups and like return to work. Actually, we're working from home. Actually, we're going in like now you have to have COVID vaccines to be able to enter the office. Like
Yeah.
all the things that I just
You
was
need to be in the
watching.
office, which means you have to get the vaccines and all that, you know.
And it's
Ev
like the massive amounts of change that started happening with the workforce in 2020. And then it just starts piling up. And you
Yeah.
start to realize that like people, like companies used to just give HR the things that dealt with people because it was like, you deal with people.
Mm,
And when you start to realize that the whole company is its people, and
mm,
you start to realize that this massive amount of change is never going to slow down and that companies are so ill-equipped. Like what we were doing is doing HR implementations, and you realize these companies are completely ill-equipped to be able to make contextual decisions off
yeah.
of data because it's all living in different places and it's not talking to each other. And so that was the big, I can't unsee like that this is for me, and I'm biased, but this is the problem of our lifetime that right now the systems and tools do not support. And when you also started thinking about it, of like, I was helping a lot of those companies that are Fortune, 2000 companies. We're talking about the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest companies in the world have resources to be able to put people around these problems. But when
Mm,
you looked at 90% of the companies are not don't have the resources to be able to solution for this. It was so massive and I became so, I started kind of concepts on the side, thought about going all in.
mm.
And I couldn't stop working on this one and I couldn't stop working on it for a very long time.
Yeah.
And then when a customer said, hey, I need this in market in 6 weeks,
Mm,
um, and I had lost my technical co-founder the day before, or I had dismissed our technical co-founder the day before we got that contract.
mhm,
Then it was like, well, I've got to build a product
mhm.
and I have a contract and here we go.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it almost arrived just like your Peace Corps letter to Nicaragua teaching entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah,
It's the irony of that story is that every one of us gets that letter who ends up doing entrepreneurship, whether it's physical or not, because
totally.
there is no playbook for it. You have to, like, the first days you start doing it, you're constantly trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Until you develop more of that confidence in your gut, like you said, where entrepreneurship is my own misshapen puzzle pieces, perspective on the world, and my passion is driving towards the gaps that I find important, which creates all of that momentum that you described, which you need to be able to keep up uh, the courage, the energy, all of these things, right? What you just described, overcoming a 6 week contract the day after you dismissed your technical founder, right? To build a product and get it to market, that doesn't just come from a paycheck, right? Or the expectation that, oh, I'm going to build a business, I'm going to make a lot of money off this, I'm going to be seen as this way by my family, all these different things. No, you were all in and you said, fuck it, let's do it. And um, I'm curious. So you hit that point, and that really started your entrepreneurial journey. You clearly have so much brilliant experience that you take into this. I'm still always in conflict with myself around, how much do I lean on myself for the skills that I've learned, right? And did I start entrepreneurship at the right point? Should I have learned longer? And you hear these exceptional stories of folks who don't go to college and start their own business, become wildly successful. I'd imagine that those are very rare edge cases, and people like to tell the story because they're exceptional. But I'm curious to hear from your wealth of experience, what were the myths about starting up that you ran into early on that maybe your skill gaps didn't challenge, and how you might have overcome them along the way?
Do you mind asking me that question one more
Of
time?
course. So you take this contract, you start running down the entrepreneurial path. You have all these brilliant skills behind you, but what were some of the myths in what it means to start up that you ran into early on that were the curveballs you had to adapt to?
Yeah. Anybody that, you know, makes that time sound easy is lying. I mean, it was, and I also think that maybe there's like, I don't know, like archetypes, traits, all of those things. Like everybody's experience is unique.
Mm,
One of maybe the gifts and real challenges of myself is I think that um, I think that I might oversimplify things where I'm like, we
mm,
can do that. We'll do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But let me tell you, the first time that we were onboarding a customer, and it's like, I'm sitting on like, I'm not going to diminish myself. I am a smart person. I can learn
Mm,
things quickly. Math, I'm fine at. Am I
mhm,
a data scientist? Absolutely not. And those first few, like the first customer that we're onboarding, like I'm bloodshot eyes on my couch in my pajamas at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to clean spreadsheets so that our platform that we're building can ingest them. And
yeah,
it's like, that's not good because I'm creating more errors in that spreadsheet than probably even existed before. And like that kind of thing where you
yeah,
kind of have to just be like, we're going to figure it out.
yeah,
I think that
definitely.
yeah, I think that that's really important. I think there's so many myths that exist out there. This industry is very strange and that like, what is presented externally is not what's actually going on internally. And that's always like your conflict as an entrepreneur too, of like, what you have to present confidence wise externally versus like how you're making the stuff come together. I think, the only thing I don't know how to like impart much wisdom on that question other than like everything is figure outable and you have to be the person that is a figure outable person where every single day, like, yes, this stuff is hard to figure out. And yes, you're saying, like, we're going to figure it out, but you're met with a wall in front of you. And I'm probably like preaching in the choir. You all know this, but it's like you have a wall in front of you every single day. The answer is not no, though. The answer is how are you going over the wall? How are you going under the wall? How are you going around the wall? Like, how are you leapfrogging that wall? Like, there's always going to be a wall. If you got into this business thinking the walls don't exist, you're going to drive yourself absolutely crazy. But if you can shift your mindset, like there's so many myths, yes, about like how you raise money, how you get customers, like the perfect way to build a business. And that's a very like pretty PDF printoutable that you can share. But like the reality is shifting your mindset to just be like, I'm going to figure out how to get over the wall every freaking day. That's what it is. It's
Yeah,
not pretty, it's messy. There's a wall, you figure it out, you keep going. Sometimes
yeah.
when you think you figured it out, like, the biggest one comes back in front of you, you're like, "Man, I really missed that one," but, like, it's just a part of it.
Yeah, yeah, it really is every single day, the recommitment to the fact that today I'm gonna solve this problem, I'm gonna climb over that wall. And that takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of courage, and some days you just don't wanna do it, you know? But you keep going, and that's what makes you different, and that's ultimately at the end of the day, the people who end up becoming successful. I mean, yes, sometimes because of certain connections, certain wealth backgrounds, certain skill sets, right? But really, you in this ecosystem, right, as you described it, what separates I don't want to say winners and losers, but what separates the people who build their business to a point that it's actually serving people, right? Even moving past the pitch deck, are the people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and do the work, right? It's ethic over a lot of these different demographic points. And that is just the one through line that has blown me away, just from being able to speak to so many founders from different backgrounds all over the world over the last year, is you really have to commit to that work ethic. And it's that can be a challenge, right? Because you have to make other sacrifices in your life, and you have to be realistic around how many of those sacrifices you can make before it starts to affect your personal health or your personal well-being, to the point that you can't just recover the next day and climb over that wall, right? So it's a balance, and I think it depends on the individual.
Yeah. Yeah. I yeah, you said something that I was like holding on to and then I lost it on that. But I think like to your point, I believe it is resilience and I believe that it's mindset. And when
Yeah.
you like I think that also being able to have perspective, to give yourself perspective, being able to own your mindset is so important in this kind of
Mm,
work. And I mean, everybody needs to find their thing and find their thing that like makes them operate at their highest level. For me, I think that something that I've started to really believe is I think that so much of this is emotional intelligence to
hmm.
me. I mean, yeah, like there
Yeah.
are some founders that have, you worked for a VC and you're going to go and you're going to get that huge round. You're going to land, you're going to have everybody from OpenAI busting down your doors. That's not gonna be my journey. That's not
Hmm.
going to be my experience, but I'll tell you, I look back at our competitors list from when we started, and I can look and I say, "Who's still in business?"
Mm,
Basically, no one. They
yeah.
all raised more money than us. They all came out of the gate with, like, you know, "Here, like, know about this company." Those aren't companies that are still around. We've hung it
Hmm.
out, and it's a lot of this is about timing and
Yeah.
hitting the market at the right time. And so I think that that resilience is so important. And on the emotional intelligence piece, I really think um, I don't know necessarily like how to articulate this, but the self discovery piece of being
Totally.
an entrepreneur is it's one of the most like powerful privileged parts of being an entrepreneur because you are shaken down to like your very core.
Yeah.
Especially as if you're, like, hey, I'm a high performing individual. I've
Yeah.
always been the best of the best. And then when
Yeah.
you start, your former colleagues, your neighbors next door start being like, hey, how's business going? And
Yeah.
you're like, damn, like it is so hard right now. But you're showing up and being like, yeah, well, like timing, we're just really hitting the market right now.
Yeah.
Like the self-discovery piece of, hey, that playbook of I'm going to fill my round in 48 hours is not going to work for like that's not going to be my experience.
Yeah.
What makes me truly unique is what make my team and like our perspective on this problem and our market
Mm,
signals and the information that our customers are giving us on feedback on our product. That's the stuff for me. Like your experience may be different, but that's the stuff for me that's we're going to win for, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's something that that self-discovery process, I think a lot of people are not prepared for that,
Totally.
um, to look themselves in the mirror of, like, truly making sure that you believe enough. I think a lot of people aren't prepared for that, and I think that that is such an important part that you've gotta be willing to, like, get to know yourself enough, get to know what makes you operate, because that kinda thing that you were talking about before where you're like, "Hey, I don't wanna get out of the bed tomorrow or today." I mean, everybody has their own experiences. But knowing what you have to do for yourself
Absolutely.
that makes you tick, who do you need to surround yourself by or not surround yourself by for a little while? Like, who's the community around you that makes you stronger? What are the activities you need to do? What are the essentials that you need to do? Like, people saying, I work, the 3 hours a night I sleep. Like, I don't function without sleep. If
Yeah.
I
Me
sleep, I'm
neither.
better. It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense for me to not do those things. And so you really
Totally.
gotta know yourself. And hey, I started this journey, like, I wasn't a 20-year-old when I started
Hmm.
Aluminous, like, I was in my 30s. I knew enough about myself that I think makes me a better founder and a stronger founder. But as a founder, regardless, you've gotta be able to do that. You've also have to be able to recognize that
Hmm.
you need your team to do that. Because
Yeah.
the thing that is different, and, lots of strong opinions over here, as we know, but, like, everybody's talking about
They're
996 or
wonderful.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, like, if founders aren't working 996, I'm not investing in them. Yo, you're investing in B players if you were telling them that. Your A
Totally.
players are the people that won't turn off. They're the
Yeah.
people that, like, are going to burn themselves out. And so you have to be self-aware enough as a founder to not only figure out what's gonna make you show up better for your team and your customers, but you've also gotta be able to have your team know that about themselves so that
Totally.
they're doing their best work as well instead of you projecting your own work patterns on them.
You just described what is typically talked about as the hardest transition for a lot of builder type founders moving into I, using the VC schedule because it's the easiest one to reference. Moving from C to Series A, the break point tends to be when founders can't move out of being the one to need to control everything and to build everything into more of a manager of people. And where what you're talking about in terms of EQ, even going into that from the beginning with how you are constantly iterating the reflection of who you are, what you're learning, how you're growing, and how things need to be different for yourself day in and day out. You're also talking about doing the same for your team. And it does require a tremendous amount of emotional intelligence and emotional bandwidth to be able to do that in a way that's effective and time efficient. Because you don't want one-on-one meetings in your calendar all day, but you need to be able to check in and to set your team up in a way either systematically or
Mhm.
through your presence that is going to allow them to thrive. I had one guest on the show. He was the former president of the American Foundation for the Blind, which is Helen Keller's organization. And he talked about his handicap only becoming a disability when he was in a disabling situation. He described a high shelf where you need to get something as a disabling situation for someone who might be shorter, right? And what you're talking about, and what he talked about, which resonated, and I still think about it to this day clearly, is you need to create an enabling situation for your A players. And enabling situation sometimes means getting to know, learning, and knowing more about how they work than they might even know,
Mhm.
so that they can thrive within the scope of the vision that you're creating. And it's a perfect transition to our next topic. Our second topic is forming the early team. So I'd love to learn more. You talked about who to surround yourself, who to not surround yourself with. And you described it as a very personal self-reflection and discovery process. But you're also working in a space that is an expert in people. What do you typically look for in early hires, whether it's for yourself or if you're helping others?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I'm not gonna pretend that, I had it all figured out. And, I've gotten things really right in a lot of
Hmm.
ways, and I've also messed up a lot of the ways along the way and, like, really learned things about myself, like, I hold on to people for too long because I really wanna give everyone a fighting chance, and I
Yeah,
I wait too long,
I'm
right?
the same way.
And so, I'm definitely not going to say that it's all perfect, but that's part of the experience, and I don't know how anyone would say that they haven't gone through that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I learned very quickly is I was coming from corporate, but I'm a builder. I'm the person
Mhm.
I've always been like a really strong IC. I've always been like a doer, like I can do strategy and operations.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of bad advice out there. And I think when you look at pitch decks, you're gonna see, in the early days, like if you look at another company, hey, this pitch deck, raised $30 million. You should look at what they did. They're gonna say like, hey, we brought in somebody from Google, and
Mm.
this person comes from Deloitte, and this person comes from da 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 da. Those are nice to have. Those aren't the people, saying like, I have an exited founder on my team. Don't look for the, I learned quickly to not look for the title or the industry experience. What you need as a founder is people in the mix with you that are going to build alongside you and not be the person that says, I don't do that. Because a lot of these
Mm.
people, I was used to coming from a small organization where I was used to, I can do, like I have no shame. I will do anything. I will take out the
Yeah.
trash. Like that is part of what it is to build a company. And honestly, like just have fun with it.
Yeah.
But if you bring in those industry folks, like you don't need more you shoulds around you.
Mhm.
You really need people that are going to be builders alongside you. And so
Yeah.
understanding that there's also a difference between an advisor and a team member. A mentor is very different than a team member. And so, don't index on industry, don't index on title, index on people that have the skill sets and are the doers that will build around you. I was also really fortunate to actually, my former leadership coach joined us on our team to build our community initially. And one of the things she recommended was this book called Day One. This is Day One. It's by Drew Dudley. And so she, before even started Illuminous, this is something that I think companies wait a long time to do. What I did before, really starting the company was to actually define my values, but
Yeah.
even more so than values, because values can feel like intangible sometimes. Like, what does that actually mean?
Sure.
Really defining behaviors.
Mm.
So, what we did early on was define those behaviors where I think it's like we have five or six. First one was Patagonia's founder that says, if it's broke, fix it. Second one was the company that cares the most wins. Third came from a Peloton instructor that was like, everybody's job involves mindset. Like mindset is a part of everybody's job. Your therapist probably tells you progress over perfection. And then the one for me is assholes won't win here.
Mm.
And that was really important because those are things that are tangible. They're things that you can, when you're thinking about who's my right teammate, I need the people that have the skill sets. I need the people that want to grow and learn alongside of us. So if they don't have the skill sets, they're going to go and figure it out and teach themselves. They've got that curiosity and hunger. But then are they operating in the way that we want to build our company? As
Yeah.
in, like, these are the ways I want to work. I want to do great work. I want to do quality work, but I don't want
Mm.
to work with assholes. Like, I've worked
Yeah.
with assholes and I don't want to do it again. And it's an immense privilege and responsibility to be a founder and get
Yes.
to choose those things. And so,
Totally.
really, like, think about what you want from the people that
Mm.
you work this hard with, and that's
Yeah.
something that's really empowering of like, we've got a team of like awesome people that do great work and they build and they operate in a way that I really respect.
Yeah.
Um, and so, those are some of the things I think that I index on. They're things you can refer to when your teammates are doing things that you really like. So it starts to reinforce that these things are helpful. And also, when you make those hires that, hey, they've got behavioral flare ups that did completely inappropriate things, even if they came from the hottest company in town and have a really big name, I can point and say, assholes won't win here. And that's it.
Yeah.
I don't have to say
Yeah.
anything else. It's done.
It's such a wonderful, tangible advice, Noel. Thank you. Because there's so much. I've had my own personal brainstorming and challenge wrapping my head around this idea that I do truly believe that a values driven system inside a company can define culture. It can put a framework around decision making that allows scalability in organization alignment and execution. But the bridge between those two concepts have always been difficult for me. I agree with that values can feel intangible. I thought about, well, how far out can you extend values? But what you did is you created a extremely smart shortcut, which is rather than trying to force fit values as a framework into defined action, create something that is closer to what you were trying to achieve at the source, which is this idea of tangible behaviors. I'm going to steal that and use
Good.
it at all of my next quarterly plannings because
Love
I
that.
think it's such an incredible idea. And
Good.
my one of my follow-up questions towards the beginning of when you started speaking was, well, how do you create culture before the organization is growing and you have these frameworks and you have defined it, but it's by putting smaller steps in place like a lot of founders do for people to hold on to, for you to be able to create your foundation around in a way that will not shake as you continue to grow upwards. um, I'm curious, off the tail end of that, you've had success. Yes, it's been choppy, right? But you've had success in growing the team around defining tangible behaviors and leveraging that for what you point to when things go right or when things go wrong. When things do go wrong, um, what challenges have surprised you most along the way? You know, you are farther along, I would say, than most founders with Illuminous in at least in terms of idea stage companies or very early companies versus being in market and being at the level of investment that you're at. Um, in that journey, you know, what's caught you off guard?
Part of it is that I think part of it is an evolution of,
Mm,
um and we have, an incredible investor in us, Kara Trott, that built her company over 25 years in, like, the benefits space, and
mm,
I mean, essentially kind of bootstrapped the company into, like, a $2 billion company, and that was in the early 2000s, like, starting in the early 2000s, like, that's so badass. And even hearing her, like, you kinda have these, like, handful of conversations as you're building a company that, like, hit at the exact right time, and they're kind of your handful of, like, "Whoa, that wisdom is exactly what I needed to hear at the right time." And I think that one of the things she shared with me that really resonated when it hit was around how you need different teams for different stages in your company. And that can be really
mm,
hard too when you think about, I've got somebody, we've been very fortunate and we've had people that have stayed with us for a very long time. But understanding that, like, both the skill sets you need for different parts of the company, they're very different. And also just knowing that, like, as a founder, like, you're everybody's a very critical part of it, but you've got to manage your time and your energy as, like, your biggest resource, right? And so looking at team structures and, like, how those need to evolve over time, I think that sometimes had caught me off guard because it was like, oh, I've got a great person for this thing, and they are a great person, but you have different people for different stages of the company. And so just recognizing it's not about, like, it's always going to be living and breathing and needing to evolve. And I think that can be something that's kind of hard as you're like, oh, I finally got, like, the right team in place, like rock star team. And then you're like, it's constantly just gotta shift because we need different
yeah.
things at different times. Like, I noticed for myself, something that I thought was super smart early on that I don't think served me is, early on, like, we had a pretty large bench of part-timers. And it was
Mm,
great because it was like, "Hey, I'm getting awesome talent that honestly I cannot afford, like, otherwise."
yeah.
And so I was getting really great people, and I was getting them for shorter number of hours per week, right? And something that, I held on to that for a long time and felt very sure about that model. And then all of a sudden, I really realized like I had become the node in the nexus around like for our team.
Yeah. Yeah.
So every time, instead of like taking things from me and off
Yeah.
of me,
I understand.
I became that like project manager almost, right? Of like
Yeah.
you're constantly getting people up to speed because they're out of the loop.
Yeah.
And I held on to that for a very long time because I thought we had the right team and it was completely depleting. Like it was a very bad use of my energy and
Yeah.
of and
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like that's something that was a very big shift and surprise for me just as we
Uh,
continue to move along.
it's such a interesting takeaway. I've operated at different points with the same perspective, and I totally hear you. Even though I hadn't personally come to that succinct and intellectual of a conclusion, you're absolutely right. You go into the fractional approach at times thinking, well, this is actually taking jobs off my plate. It's creating scale. But to your point, if you don't eventually transition off of that, you just become the linchpin for that fractional ecosystem to be able to just function and operate. And like any key person dependency, eventually you will hit a breaking point.
Mhm, mhm. And now, like, I'm actively it's this interesting thing too because as founders, we're like we've internalized this, like, up and to the right
Yeah.
mentality where we're always
Yeah.
in growth mode.
Yeah.
And the question we're getting is how many people are on your team? And it's so silly. And it's like that's such an ego
Yeah.
driven thing, but like we've internalized it because we're always thinking about growth, right?
Sure.
And that was like it was just a really interesting moment where you're like, I think we're going to be a stronger team if
Yeah.
we have fewer people. And it's gonna be a better use of our resources, and just, like, think about the time we're building these companies right now, like, we can do things with AI that 6 months ago were impossible. I had interns over the summer that trained our AI in their job so that it can run without them,
Wow.
and you're like, "That's amazing," but then when somebody's like, "Well, what does your team size look like now?" And you're like, "Well, we're this size." You know what I mean? Like, it's so
Yeah. Yeah.
stupid, but it's like we just, like, have internalized these, like, weird things as founders where we're making irrational decisions because of,
Yeah.
like, the market forces around us.
Yeah, totally. And that ecosystem needs to shift. And
So
some of those perspectives already have, but you're absolutely right. I mean, fundamentally how business is done is going to change because of how AI is coming into the mix operationally. But yeah, it's such an interesting perspective. I hadn't thought about it from the headcount perspective and what you can put on your pitch deck. I've done it, but I haven't thought about it like you just talked about. And I've personally thought about that fractional talent as here's what I can afford in jobs that people are way more skilled at than I can. So therefore I can save time and money by right.
Mhm.
It sounds like we have some very similar minds. And I told you I was going to watch the clock. I realized how close we are to the end now, and I realized I could talk to you forever. So instead of continuing to ask you more about that, I'll take us to the last topic, which talks about pivoting amid market forces. So investment ecosystems, worlds changes, COVID, all the things you talked about at the beginning of this. Um, Talk to me about whether it's commercially or globally. You gave me some of the origin stories of the company, and that was brilliant. What are some of the external shifts that you are dealing with that other modern day founders alongside you, like me, are also dealing with or need to be thinking about that are starting to shift your approach and how you do business?
Yeah. I mean, we went live in market in Jan 22
Yeah.
with paying customers with a product. We've only ever lived in shifts and pivots. We raised money in 20 we to I mean, we started with a DEI use case to
Hmm.
do analytics around like what in the world how different is that conversation now than it was in
Yeah.
January 22?
Yeah.
We raised money in 23 and we're as our first round, and we were told, I don't know how you're going to raise a first round in 2023. And the market's only gotten worse since then. And, so all that to say is like, it's always going to be shifting,
Yeah.
putting the hat on from the beginning that I'm putting something in market, I'm going to test it, I'm going to sell it to pay for it. But like I'm always following a thread, and you listen and you adapt and you shift, and it's whatever you're starting with. It's like you're just kind of I use this metaphor all the time that people may find super annoying, but like I think of it as just you're like shifting the Play-Doh. You're just like molding the Play-Doh
Yeah.
in different shapes, and you keep going until it's perfect. And it's
Yeah.
or not perfect, but it's like the right thing. And to me, that's product
Yeah.
market fit. And it's like you gotta not run out of money, and you gotta
Hmm.
just like adapting instead of dying to like get this thing to the right shape to hit the market at the right time. And so, for us, it was like what we ultimately are building now is what the light bulb went off to solve, that many years ago. But we were forced to get there faster because of market shifts around us. And so, I also like may sound like maybe unfocused by saying I think my job as a CEO is to be playing a game of chess constantly where I have multiple moves in front of me. Because you're going to have those shifts where the two biggest vacations I've taken since I started this company, the 2 days I got back from those vacations are the days when we had lead investors pull out. And
Wow.
overnight, like we were thinking somebody approached us about a seed round. We go down this path, we go back
Yeah.
and forth on negotiations, and like I've got my plans, I'm ready to hire people, I've got people teed up, and the
Yeah.
deal falls through the cracks because
Yeah.
we couldn't come to an agreement on like what that partnership should look like.
Yeah.
And those things are going to happen, and those are your days when you're like I'm in the ground, like we are done. It is figure outable. It's
Yeah.
hard. It means you probably have to lay off a lot of your team. It means you need to rethink about your growth strategy. It means that roadmap that you were thinking about is like way pushed out because you can't afford to do that right now. All those things are going to shift. So to an investor, I may sound unfocused, but to me, having lived through these market forces and knowing that things are never going to turn out how you think they're going to turn out,
Yeah.
having those like release valves to be able to do different things to me has been really important to us getting where we are.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Where you see people typically fail is when they hold on too long without pivoting. It's why most startups run out of money before they hit product market fit, right? The approach that you're talking about that people are maybe criticizing you for sounding unfocused is how I've been taught at the innovative product manager level how you're supposed to navigate an early market, right? And
Survival.
it's survival, and the advice I've gotten from or the input I've gotten from investors who I've spoken to, who I respect and appear to be authentic, they tell me that they're more interested in investing in teams that are resilient and can adapt as the problems come up, as opposed to whatever it is that they're solving right now, because it's probably not going to be the right one, right? So you're talking about all of these things and maybe running into conflicts in communication, which reinforces your point from earlier. Be careful what advice you listen to and know how to archive certain advice as you can't come across everyone who thinks the same way or knows everything you're doing or has lived the same experience and would know all the context as to why you did what you did or how you've gotten to where you're at today. And all of that is extremely important. Now, I want to be respectful of your time. I am accidentally going to take us over by a few minutes. That's very unprofessional of me as a host, but I want to get your perspective on one last question, and then I want to let you be able to talk about Illuminous. So, it it comes after that last um, explanation you gave of how you've handled these pivots, and you are as uh, experienced as any founder I've spoken to in terms of being able to answer this question. What do founders typically get wrong about pivoting?
Um, the only thing the only thing I can say is that I think that there's always going to be like negative connotations about different things that shouldn't be negative connotations within this space.
Hmm.
I think that your startup should always be about pivoting. You need to adjust what you're doing based off of the market. And if you're not listening.
Yeah.
And so I think that I've gotten a lot of like from our own experience, like, oh, I heard you pivoted. And it's like that's a good thing. So
Right.
I think that's a part of the process. And any company that doesn't pivot, like we've all got those in the blockbusters, the da da da, like everybody has to, and every business has to. And um like, what am I going to tell so and so? If somebody's investing in you at the earliest stages, they should be investing in you.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be investing in the concept, I believe. I have my own bias, but like that's what I would look for is like an investor. We look for investors that trust us. They trust
Yeah.
how we operate. They trust our experience to go and build a really impactful solution. And yeah, I mean, in terms of getting wrong about pivoting, don't wait too long. Like, don't wait too
Yeah.
long to do it. Always be thinking about pivoting. It doesn't have to be a big, huge one. Like, you should always be adjusting so that you're at the right time in the right place. I think so. We're in HR tech. We People are very like maybe don't necessarily understand HR tech because they're like, oh, that's a recruiting solution or an
Mm.
engagement survey or a performance system or an HR system. Um, the way I think about like what we've built is you're always trying to think about that moat depending on what happens. Right now, think about recruiting software. Like Greenhouse is a very expensive solution. Companies are not hiring. So, what does Greenhouse do when there's a really down market? Look at engagement software to
Yeah.
do surveys. Those companies are very much struggling right now because that's something that is spent when times are good. That budget is cut when times are bad. That
Yeah.
translates to, I think, what a lot of investors think is like, oh, well, HR only invests when times are good or times are bad. And you're like, actually, we're a data platform that houses the data across the system. So no matter if
Yeah.
times are good or times are bad, like you're constantly going to need that historical data in order to be able to forecast. And we bring that all together. So
Yeah.
thinking about market proofing yourself
Sure.
um, when you're thinking about those pivots is something that I've had to think a lot about over the years, and I would encourage someone to do if you're thinking about pivoting. It's like, okay, and that's potentially why I think personally a lot of the VC market is um, broken, is that it's like you invest in something only for hyper scale and for a moment. Think about like Lime scooters, Bird scooters, and it's
Yeah.
like, like that those like big tranches of like very quick hyper growth, hyper scale, followed by okay, then the company's just gone.
Yeah.
I also really believe in building a strong, enduring company that also
Absolutely.
makes a lot of money and
Yeah.
solves a very big problem.
I couldn't agree more. Noelle, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. I know at the beginning you said, as a woman entrepreneur, you struggle with people not taking you seriously. If anyone doesn't take you seriously, they're an idiot. You're incredibly bright, so emotionally intelligent. The vulnerability you showed, I'm incredibly grateful for. And you have clearly learned so much in such a short period of time and will continue to drive success forward. And I hope more people get to meet you, work with you, and invest in you because you're doing incredible things. And I wish you the best of luck on your journey. Noelle, for those who are still with us, even though I took us over, the floor is yours. Please take as much time as you'd like. Plug yourself, plug your company. Where can people find you, and why should they reach out?
Yeah. So first off, just thanks for having me and thanks for providing this platform for so many of us to just learn from each other. These are the kinds of conversations that need to be happening and are not happening. In terms of Illuminous, so as I mentioned at the top of the call, we're an AI powered employee data platform. Essentially, what we do is we become like an insights layer to all of your HR and people data within an organization. So typically, if you're not as familiar, or hey, you're an employee probably at a company, you're logging into like an HR system, like an ADP, Workday, UKG for things like scheduling, for learning about your payroll. You're also probably applying to jobs through recruiting platforms. Every now and then, someone will give you an engagement survey to ask you what you think about data or working at the company. And then somebody's going to probably be giving you a performance review every year, every 6 months, every quarter. All those systems don't talk to each other. And so, what we do is we bring all that data together into one place and pair it with your business data. So, what we're doing essentially is ingesting all of that data. We normalize it so that apples that can actually talk to apples. And what that means is that when you're looking at someone like Noelle's profile within an organization, I actually get to see her entire employee journey through all of those different HR systems. So, what that means is that we're helping companies today to better understand the entire employee journey so that as things continue to change so fast within all of these companies, we're helping them to make better decisions because we're giving more context around some of those decisions. So, key things right now that we're working with companies on quite a bit is workforce planning is super top of mind as companies are thinking about just how the workforce evolves with AI and automation, like which people are going to be in which roles. Maybe I hired Noelle in customer success, but she really knows the customer. And I think she'd do a really good job providing voice of the customer on our product team. Those are the types of shifts that we're seeing companies want to be able to do more of is how do we move people through organizations? How do we upskill, reskill? How do we move you into your next role and your next challenge? Because right now, oftentimes within the systems, you're seeing a system that's allowing me to hire Noelle and fire Noelle. Systems are not good at helping to understand if Noelle's great within your company, how do we find her next position and what should that pathway look like? Most companies have anecdotes. They don't have the data that's going to tell you to how to actually do that. A couple of other things that we're doing with companies is there's a whole lot of M&A activity right now. What that means is that you can end up spending sometimes like a year and a half of time just getting systems to talk to each other so that you can look at a new company. So, what we do is we can help companies to instantly have access to integrations data. So, being able to have like a place where you can see across companies in one place to make better decisions on do we have redundancies? Do we need to make changes in terms of our location strategy? That type of thing. Also, people are changing systems all the time. So, like, hey, my company's on ADP, we're moving into Workday. Challenge with that, again, we talked about siloed data earlier, is that that data is not talking to each other. And so maybe you've been on ADP for 4 years, your company's trying to think more proactively around performance management, for example. If you're moving from ADP to Workday, chances are you're going to lose a whole lot of that data, and companies are constantly changing systems. So what we hope to do is bring that historical data into one place, kind of being like the glue between these different systems so that you don't lose access to that visibility on, hey, I have this historical data. I want it to actually be able to inform my future decisions. So those are some of the places that we are working with companies most today. Just in terms of like the size of companies, a big thing that I alluded to earlier in the conversation is mid-market companies oftentimes don't have access to the kinds of resources as very large companies. And so what our sweet spot tends to be is like 500 to like 15,000 employees. That is kind of the place where, hey, I need visibility across my workforce. We're growing as a company, but I probably don't have teams built around this problem to solve it for me. I probably can't afford enterprise solutions that are going to be really expensive to do this. And so that's a great place for us to come in, where we're bringing mid-market companies these best practices across various companies. So if you're at a company that is in that range or kind of dealing with any of those problems, we would love to show you more, or at the very least, just get feedback on how you're doing it within your company today. Best places to find us would probably be either following us on LinkedIn. So you can follow myself. I'm sure you'll get see my name, Noelle London, on LinkedIn. We also have an Illuminous page. Other thing is go to our website. You can kind of check out what this means. I know I'm saying a lot of words. I know we've said a lot of words through this podcast, but we have things like demo videos kind of talking about some of the kinds of companies that we work with today, sports entertainment industry, retail industry. So if you want to check us out, and Chris, if you would be open to linking us in your show notes, our
Absolutely.
website is illuminous.com. So ILLOOMINUS.com. In upper right hand corner, you can click and find some time with us, and we'd love to get to know you and about what's top of mind, and to just share a little bit more about what we're working on.
Wonderful. Noelle, thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed this experience as much as I have.
Fun.
I will
Yeah.
see you backstage in a minute, and I'll close out
Yeah.
the show and take us home.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of the Warm Blooded Founders. Noelle London with Illuminous joined us today. It was such a pleasure to have her on. For those of you who are watching it live, you're already on the XG Partners page. We focus on founder-focused solutions. We typically operate at the growth M&A point, similar to what Noelle was talking about, for founders who are looking to either systematize, scale themselves out of their business, or scale their business out of where it is today and into someone else's hands. That's typically where we focus. And if you're looking for more content as a founder, just on growth, authentic conversations, everything we do is very human-centered. Follow the page. We will continue to go live with the Warm Blooded Founders Show, and hopefully some other shows that we have in the mix in 2026. So with all that said, thank you so much. I'm your host, Chris Sherrick. Stay warm-blooded. We'll see you soon.